you doing?
Good. It's beautiful where you're at.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite views.
All right, so let's go through some of these articles. Obviously, one, I talked to you before we went on. You were just on a coalition call, a big phone call with Patrick Byrne and everything that's going on there. So, if you want to brief my audience on what's going on, go right ahead.
Well, Patrick was one of our guests this morning. We also had Garland and Tamara Favorito out of Georgia, and others. Oh, let me get my coffee and cream, please. The ballots were seized in Georgia the other day, and what needs to be understood, even though those ballots only are supposed to be held from 2020 for federal law 22 months, they're giving me coffee with these, which I won't do, and they don't have any milk. That's frustrating, but okay, that's what I thought to change up. Anyway, Nino.
Good morning, folks. Friday morning
yeah,
here in Juan's in Hawaii.
Look at that. That's beautiful.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I just had to catch a big wave there. It's pretty good. Last night we had some whales that were right here that were feeding, and they were just pooling right there. It was just beautiful to watch, and it lasted for hours. So the whole all up and down the waterfront, we had hundreds of people just standing there, watching whales eat, whatever. So blowing spouts. And
what kind of whales?
Very fun. I believe they were, but I don't know. There's a couple of them that do kind of come in here, and and I don't get into that much. I'd love to, but I don't have time to pay that close attention. I just knew they're whales. I was having fun. We filmed them, and somebody else would tell me what they were. So,
well, let's get into this. ICE protests are kicking off today and tomorrow, and it looks like we talked we had a discussion about this. You feel like these are going to now escalate every month, every day, every week, every month, going into spring and summer, and potentially into next fall. Could that disrupt the 2026 midterms? And then Trump has also said, and I saw this on social media, so I don't have any validation on this. It's hearsay. It was just told to me that he's soon to be signing an executive order.
Well, I've been very definitive on this. Number one, Trump himself said several months back that in a matter of days, exact words, he's going to be signing an executive order concerning the 2026 election. Now, my team, several of which are on the call right now, that's going on in the background for me, helped to put together the executive order proposal. It's 17 pages long, which was just an accident of fate, but that's how many pages it is. That we've been told is the core of what the end product will be. The attorneys were looking at it and fussing through stuff, and they were going to use 80%, then 70%, and then 90%, and of what we had put in. But it'll be some significant portion of what was in our proposal and proposed version. The reason that I had my team put that together is because the early version that I was aware of that had been put together before Trump even took office in the second term was not adequate to the task, just because we've learned so much on some of the sneakiness going on in the background that has to be addressed in order to get to an honest election in 2026. That I think really within the team we had a better understanding of the details that would be required in order to get to an honest election in 2026. Even now, there's not an understanding. Not yet. A few minutes. Let me finish the call. Even now, I think that there's not a complete understanding of all of the minutia of information needed to run an honest election. For example, one of the people that should be a technical advisor hasn't been fully brought on to the team yet, and so I was advocating even yesterday that without that person directly involved, they would not get to where they need to get to just from a technical side, understanding, you know, the minutia, not just of machines, but how elections have to be run. A lot of past knowledge has kind of been forgotten.
You mentioned to me that there was a chance there could be a delay in the 2026 midterms. Do you still feel that way?
Well, nobody else you're going to talk to would even acknowledge such a thing. It's insane. And I know that there was some talk several years ago that as we got to this phase of what's occurring, that was an option that almost certainly would have to be played. But certainly nobody in the credible world of the election stuff coming up in 2026 would make a statement like that. And I would say this, that everybody involved has to play a straight game at this point in time. There's been no such thing proposed anywhere, and the circumstances going on in the country certainly wouldn't warrant that with the information available at this point in time. There would have to be something excruciatingly extreme and dramatic to
Well,
pause.
do you see that happening?
Well, of course, there's a couple of things that have not occurred yet that I believe have to occur, that as the country goes through this moment, in order to reset our governance within the country, the way that things work. The near-death experience is something that is so gripping, so extreme, that everybody's breath is knocked out of them.
Well, so Juan, you still feel like we're headed towards that near-death experience. Like that's unavoidable, correct?
My opinion, yes, and within the context of that, you finally get to some kind of, complete resolution. Short of that occurring, we wouldn't probably reset adequately to do the problems that we're in right now would continue. The pause wouldn't stop the direction America's headed towards some kind of inclusion into the global New World Order operation.
So in other words, the globalists are going to move. They're going to move full speed ahead with a great reset. And what we're trying to do, and what we will do, is make it the great reset. We cannot avoid this moment in time that's coming. That they want to be the great reset, but we want it to be the great reset. We cannot avoid this at any cost, correct?
Well, we don't want to avoid it. You have to deal decisively with these people that have gotten into positions of authority and power. Let me give you an example how extreme the group is that we're dealing with. A number of the members of this group that have been directly involved in controlling American elections. Okay, and it all starts with elections. The people that get into power, that are doing the agreements, that are steering America off into the abyss, literally. They are, even though they may hold high office, they're in very critical positions in finance, in corporations. there's one arm of this globalist operation that is targeted precisely into the election operations, not just in America, but across the world. Now, they are full-blown, all-out, total Satanists. And one of the marks that several of them carry, a particular one on the left forearm, I believe, is a tattoo of a screaming Pope. This goes back. Hold on. This is important. I want people to Google this. Go search it on your search engine. It goes back to Francis Bacon and a lot of the work that's done through various secret handshake groups. And so, beyond the secret handshake, to have marked your body with this image as part of a satanic ritual, it's a rite. And if you haven't essentially made a particular type of an oath to Satan, if you were to have that tattoo, literally you could be taken out for even displaying it without the, right.
It's really stupid to mark themselves so they can be identified.
No. They're in a realm where they don't fear anything. Okay, they don't fear that you're going to discover them in that way. They're fully sold out. It's a leadership thing. Okay, so when you understand that as a target, they have operated within their professional career and life to as a particular wing of this Nazi-esque Satanist party. And by the way, Nazi is thrown around so loosely all the time. It's just, it's just painful. However, in this particular case, it applies precisely to these people that targeted our elections and elections across planet Earth. And they aren't just getting there just because they get business advantage or political advantage or anything else. They want to rule and reign over everyone else and do it from the position of a lawfully elected, for all appearances, election to put people into office that will do their bidding. And so within that electioneering that has occurred here in America, this cult, this group, has a very, very preeminent position. Now, when we get to what just happened, you can talk metals, you can talk business, banking, loans to certain groups and not others, investment opportunities, all sorts of things, military. And they're all important, but it all starts with the appearance of agreement of the people for the people governing over them, which is elections in this age in the world where it is right now. And so when you want to talk about your next investment, or is silver better than gold, or a dollar or something like that. And by the way, I didn't say dollars going to zero or going down precisely. I said you have to differentiate between a Federal Reserve note, which is not a legal U.S. dollar, it's there by fraud, and a Treasury certificate, silver or gold, and Treasury minted gold and silver coin. That's a legal U.S. dollar.
Let me just interject just for a second, because I want to get to some articles here, because this is a morning show. So I wanted to get your thoughts on quite a few different subjects here. So it says Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer's office says A bipartisan funding deal has been reached to avert government shutdown. GOP Senate leaders are now working to schedule a vote. So what's going to happen with that as well? Are we going to be looking at a shutdown, and what kind of ramifications would that have with what we're dealing with, everything in the world right now?
Well, but Trump has said, and others have said that they're moving towards some type of an agreement, and they seem to be on a path to some type of an agreement to avert going back into another shutdown. Whether that's going to turn out to be the case or not, it's hard to say. And you know, one thing everybody should be understanding at this point in time, even people directly around the president himself is not fully telegraphing his next moves. He's gone to great lengths, even amongst his closest advisors, to make sure that everybody knows that only one person actually knows what he's going to do next, and that's him. And so they can't presume that just because you're close to the president and nobody around the president looking at his actions should presume that there's some other guys that know exactly what the president's plan is or timing is. He's not conveying that, and he's making sure to let everybody know he's playing close to the vest. He doesn't get the agreement he wants, it's on. And,
all right, so here's something that I've never heard of before in my life, and he's doing it. Trump and his two sons are suing the IRS Treasury for $10 billion over tax records leak. And then in a stunning announcement, President Donald Trump also declared he's going to give about $2,000 of tariff divided checks to the middle class Americans without Congress. I mean, I've never heard of either of those two things happening. Is he serious about that? Is that really going to happen? Will people be expecting a $2,000 check in the mail? And is he going to sue the IRS?
Well, he's been very clear that he's going to give tariff money to the American citizens, and the only question is how much and how is it going to be allocated. And a lot of times Trump goes right up to the brink, threatens to do one thing, and to the last second modifies to avoid, let's say, legal crises. And he'll get everybody baited into one thing and then avert it by doing it slightly different. And everybody's just shocked somehow that he avoided some maelstrom. As to the IRS, remember, I've told this audience numerous times and other audiences excruciatingly clearly, the Internal Revenue Service is a foreign corporation. It is a corporation domiciled in in Puerto Rico. It's located just a few blocks down from the Federal Reserve's offices. Neither the Internal Revenue Service or the Federal Reserve are federal. They're no more federal than Federal Express. They have this, given to them, but it's just not true. Courts have found, this is the precise exact terminology, that the IRS is a corporation. Okay? So with that in mind, and by the way, they collect this income that then goes to pay interest on Federal Reserve money that's loaned out to the U.S. That money, as the Grace Commission determined back in the 80s under Reagan, no money that you pay into the IRS actually goes out to do any government work. It's loans to the government done by the Federal Reserve that you pay interest on that are actually used for all the federal programs. The money you're paying to the IRS is going to pay interest on those loans. And that was one of the most shocking parts of the Grace Commission report in the 80s. You have huge moves out across the country. The figure that was put out the other day, I think it's high, but It's in the zone. I've told your audience and others that the non-filing by persons who should otherwise be filing a tax return was about 50 million as of 2 years ago. 50 million people that were filing no return. The figure I heard just the other day, and I think it is probably a little bit high, but it's in the zone and it could very well be exactly accurate, was 80 million are now not filing any kind of a return at all. And so how can that continue for very long when you have such a discrepancy amongst American citizens as to their responsibilities? Now, I will tell you that within that particular briefing that I had a few weeks back, the core to that is that corporations, big companies, in order to not be in a hassle, they require workers. If you want to work for the company, you file, your tax return, you put your deductions on it, and they withhold. The people that aren't doing the withholding and then are not filing at all tend to be smaller business owners, people that are receiving money and they're not, required to file it somehow in the normal sense. And so you have a, maybe you might call it parallel economy, off the books economy from a corporate America standpoint. And so it's hard for corporations because they don't want to be the one attacked. And if you're the IRS, even with another 80,000 agents brought on the payroll, are they going after individual mom and pops, et cetera, or are they going after corporations with 30, 50, 100 employees or more, where with one fell swoop they can get a large swath and get greater compliance on the numbers? And then how long will that last under this current administration? Of course, President Trump had the nameplate on the IRS building, all of that removed, where it said Internal Revenue Service, which, by the way, when you think of IRS employees, it's a private corporation, but they are federal employees who then administer the collection of the taxes. And so this is this hard thing for people to get their minds around. If you look at the code, by the way, the code only applies to persons in Washington, D.C. And that's what my friend Irwin Schiff talked about. Irwin, though, however, died in prison. The courts sent him off to prison, and he did a couple of trips there, and his last one, he died in prison. Irwin did more to help everybody understand what was going on with this farce of the IRS code compliance enforcement than any other person. All the other tax protesters, if you will, the best work is still built off of Irwin's work. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal, he wrote a book. I've got a copy that he personally signed for me on tax law, the history of tax law, going back into the royal families in Europe and like that in the 1500s, all the way to the present. And the Wall Street Journal commended him as being the premier author on tax law in the country. They wanted him to go to work for the Wall Street Journal in the 80s. That's how good his work was. But he talks about the fact that the way the law is written, it only applies to federal employees working in Washington, D.C. for the essentially the foreign city, which Washington, D.C. is. It is almost an occupying army
Well, I want to ask you this. It says here Trump plans to announce his Fed chief nominee next week. I didn't know, if the Federal Reserve is its own private entity and it basically controls our money system, since when does the president have the right to pick a new Fed chair? I'm kind of confused on that. Can you clarify that for me? Because it looks like he's going to be making an announcement, I guess, today on who the new Fed chair is. I didn't know the president had any right to even do such a thing.
The Federal Reserve chair is somebody that is an appointee. So the president offers the person that he wants, and then Congress agrees to it with a vote. So if you offer somebody that Congress isn't going to like, you're not going to get them. And so that's like any other appointment. So it's an official position in the sense that we have some control over who occupies that office. But again, just to give you an idea of some of the things going on in the background, President Trump, about 3 or 4 months ago, there was a building in Washington, D.C., where the governors of the Federal Reserve had offices. It was a U.S. government federal building, but it was occupied by the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation. And what they try to do is blend these things so that to the average person looking, it's like a magic act. Well, it's got to be official federal government operation because they have federal government offices and the American taxpayers, however you want to describe that, pay for those offices that these people occupy. Yet it's a private corporation occupying those offices. So they blend these things and skew them so it's hard to understand. Well, what Trump did was he had that building closed, and you go on to the government website, it shows permanently closed, so that the Board of Governors has no place to meet that's on the taxpayer's dollar, essentially showing that, we're not going to run that part of it. You guys have your private corporation. Go find your own offices. You go pay for your own offices, putting the pressure on. And he's been putting pressure on Powell. He's been putting pressure on Powell, very intense pressure, to bring down interest rates, which are a tax on America, a throttle on America for... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Have you heard anything about Kevin Warsh? He's rumored to be the incoming Fed chair. Kevin Warsh, I think his name is.
Yeah, and until Trump does it, again, Trump is going to feint certain directions, and then when he announces it, he wants everybody to understand. They might float a name out there. You've seen this over and over and over again with Trump. And then at the last second, he goes a direction you didn't necessarily expect. And it's Washington politics to float names out and see what kind of reactions you get in case there's anything history-wise that you may want to hold off on or that wasn't dialed into the equation. And so floating a name, allowing for a reaction is totally correct.
So, all right, Juan, let me jump to the next article real quick. Donald Trump issues Cuba a warning, failing pretty soon. U.S. President Donald Trump has said Cuba is failing and having been hit hard by Washington capture of Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, which was once the Caribbean island's top oil supplier. Trump issues Cuba a warning, you're going to be failing pretty soon. Trump said that on Tuesday, Cuba will be failing pretty soon. What does this mean? And is this kind of lining up for the Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0?
Well, physical Cuba is not necessarily the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay.
But it's
so
symbolic.
Just using Cuba as an example or an analogy of what's coming.
Well, the Cuban Missile Crisis was a very specific type of standoff when Russia was moving nuclear missiles right to the shoreline of America there in Cuba. And for Russia, it was a reaction to the fact that we had nuclear missiles in range of Moscow parked in Turkey, and were moving stuff into other locations also. And so they were, tit for tat. Um, but we also weren't threatening Russia in the way that Russia was threatening us in that Cold War era. And Russia blinked, pulled the missiles back, and we averted a shooting war. We're coming up on the brink of something similar. Cuba's symbolic of that in that earlier encounter, but this crisis won't be precisely with Cuba as the hub, I don't believe. Now, that doesn't mean that Cuba's not in play. Cuba is in play. Cuba was running Venezuela. Cuba had Venezuela as a proxy state, and all of the leadership running Venezuela was answering to Cuba, who in turn was answering first to Russia and later to China. In its current form, it's primarily China that's in a control position there. And I might add, and this is a hard one for people to get their minds around, but and by the way, let me do a quick shout out. I've talked about this situation with the globalist elite group being run out of the city of London and the Davos crowd and like that. That pretty much all of the war that America is having right now is being had. It's a second revolutionary war with England and their proxies. Even when you start talking about China, Hong Kong, much of the leadership of China, bizarre as it would sound to most anybody, is being run by this globalist elite working out of City of London, otherwise known as the Davos crowd, and a couple of dozen other related organizations, the Atlantic Council, Council of Rome, on and on and on. The Masons, Council on Foreign Relations, etc. But the shout out I'd like to give to this audience, and I just love them for it, and they're starting to get real traction, and they deserve every ounce of traction they get, is the Promethean gals and their work. And Nino, you'd be well served to have either of the women over there, Promethean, as guests. Their work is without match by anybody out there as far as I'm concerned. They have a beautiful handle on things. They see things from a perspective that I've been talking about for so long, and they have an ultra long history too. So they deserve everybody being a subscriber. Send them some money. They have a cheap, very inexpensive thing to subscribe to their presentations, but they're world class every time. And I haven't heard anything they presented that I had any kind of a disagreement with. I think they're just doing tremendous work. So please, when you got people like that that are doing stuff, they give it away for free, but if you want to subscribe, do it. I could tell you, probably a dozen other people that I would say the same thing about, but, they're doing it. When we get to this standoff that is ultimately coming, it will be factions of that Davos crowd and City of London crowd that are ultimately behind this face-off that we're having on election systems. Even the name, for example, Dominion in the vote software. Why that choice? Because all of the countries within the Commonwealth are commonly referred to as Dominion countries, going back to a royalist perspective. And then there's, factions of that are extremely anti-God. As I've described to your audience, go Google what I said earlier and start doing the research, and you're going to serve the public well. This is a God, anti-God thing. When we do the face-off, this dark moment that's ahead, ultimately it's
Okay,
a near-death experience. We're going to choose sides.
so, but 2026 is the reason why we're heading into this. I mean, the action that's going to be taken is the reason why we're headed into this dark moment.
Well, and here's the reason this is
accelerating, right?
Yeah, here's the reason this is so important. You have to pick a lane. Everybody's going to have to pick a lane. And if you're not going to take the decisive action necessary to guarantee an honest election in 2026, 2028 won't matter. 2026 is the decisive one. In fact, let me just tell everybody here clearly, President Trump is absolutely 1 trillion% aware that if we don't get 2026 right, it's not just the country that goes down. It's not just good guys go down and fate of the world and all that, but that his own family, he himself will not survive after 2026 because the powers that be would target him personally. And so everything's on the line in this 2026 election. With that as the background, I think there should be no question within this audience as to the severity, the force of will which President Trump is willing to exercise and knows he will have to exercise in order to ensure a honest 2026 election. Now, you just saw something that many of the people in this audience have been screaming for a long time, which is, do something decisive to, go correct 2020. Everybody talks a big game, and the president talks about how it was stolen, etc. The one place in the country that actually maintained the ballots because of a court action was there in Georgia, and it was the Favoritos, Garland and Tamara, who are members of our coalition and have been doing yeoman's work all along. They actually got the court order that preserved those ballots in Georgia, and so that they could be seized just 2 days ago, and that go back to the 2020 election. Georgia was amongst the worst in the country in the theft of the 2020 election, and those mechanisms that were used there. Here's the problem.
You got a hard stop.
Okay, let me just add this one thing. If we get an honest election 2026, the way America looks with its elected officials changes so radically. First off, the Democratic Party doesn't survive. Second off, the rhinos don't survive, because America isn't actually the way we look if you just look at our elected officials. It's through vote manipulation that we have these people in there. Now, the reason that's important is it's now an existential moment. It's a survival moment for both sides. And much of that fight, that battle, will not and is not happening in the election arena. They can't win against the momentum that's coming, just like with Georgia and other things. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard was present at the seizure of those ballots, observing. Why was she present? She deals with foreign, not domestic, because it was foreign interference, and that's what they're proving.